Commander Hyunwoo stood at the massive viewing window of Nexus 7 station and watched ships from dozens of worlds dock and leave. The space station was bigger than most cities and served as the main hub for mercenary work across the galaxy. Every day, thousands of alien warriors came here looking for jobs that paid well and promised good fights. Hyunwoo was not like the other beings on the station. He was human, and most aliens still thought humans were weak and new to space travel. The Korean officer wore the dark blue uniform of Earth's Stellar Defense Corps, but nobody on the station seemed to care about his rank or his unit. A soft beep from his wrist device made him turn around. Lieutenant Dae-jin approached with a datapad in his hands and a worried look on his face. Dae-jin was the best communications expert in their unit, and he rarely showed concern about anything. "Sir, we have new orders from command," Dae-jin said, and handed over the pad. "The Galactic Trade Consortium wants to hire us for a recovery mission." Hyunwoo read the mission details and raised his eyebrows. The job was simple in description, but very dangerous in reality. Someone had stolen quantum encryption cores from a consortium research facility and taken them to a fortress world in the Outer Rim. The cores contained technology that could break almost any security system in known space. "Who took them?" Hyunwoo asked as he scrolled through the intelligence report. "The Crimson Void Syndicate," Dae-jin replied. "They are the biggest mercenary organization in this sector. Their leader is a Valoran named Thexmar, and he has never lost a battle." Hyunwoo knew about the Crimson Void. They were not just mercenaries but also pirates and thieves who took jobs that other groups would not touch. Thexmar was famous across the galaxy for being smart and ruthless. The Valoran had 4 arms and stood almost 3 meters tall like all his species. "How many defenders are we looking at?" Hyunwoo asked. Dae-jin checked his notes. "Intelligence reports say over 300 mercenaries from 6 different species. They have Krathian berserkers for close combat, Zephyrian snipers for long range, Gorvani heavy troops for assault work, and others. The fortress is on Kepler 442b and has military-grade shields and weapons. And they want us to take it with how many people?" 12, sir. Just our team." Hyunwoo almost laughed. 12 humans against 300 trained alien warriors seemed like suicide. But he had learned not to underestimate his species or his unit. The Stellar Defense Corps had trained them for exactly these kinds of impossible missions. He walked over to the station's main communications array where Sergeant Yuna was checking equipment. Yuna was small even for a human woman, but she could make explosives from almost anything. Her bag of tools and devices looked innocent, but Hyunwoo knew she could level a building with what she carried. "Yuna, what do you think about hitting a fortress with 300 hostiles?" She looked up from her work and smiled. "Sounds like fun, sir. When do we leave?" Before Hyunwoo could answer, his wrist device beeped again. This time it was Corporal Sung-ho calling from the weapons market on the lower decks. Sung-ho had the best eyes in the unit and could hit targets that other snipers could not even see. "Commander, you need to come down here," Sung-ho's voice came through the speaker. "The aliens are talking about us." Hyunwoo, Dae-jin, and Yuna made their way through the busy corridors of the station. Aliens of every size and shape moved around them, but most paid little attention to the humans. A group of tall, blue-skinned Andromedans looked down at them with curiosity. Some smaller Rigel traders stepped aside to let them pass, but did not seem worried. The weapons market was loud and crowded. Alien voices speaking dozens of languages mixed with the sounds of energy weapons being tested and metal being shaped. Sung-ho was crouched behind a display of plasma rifles and motioned for them to stay quiet. "Listen," he whispered and pointed toward a group of alien mercenaries near the ammunition counter. A massive Gorvani with thick gray skin was talking to 2 Krathian warriors. The Gorvani stood over 2 meters tall, and his arms were as thick as tree trunks. His voice was deep and rough like grinding stone. "The consortium hired humans for the Kepler job," the Gorvani said and laughed. 12 of those soft pink things against the Crimson Void." One of the Krathians hissed with amusement. Krathians looked like giant lizards with sharp teeth and claws. They were born fighters who loved battle more than anything else. "Humans are new to space," the Krathian said. "They have no experience with real war. Thexmar will crush them in hours." The second Krathian nodded. "I heard they still use chemical explosives instead of plasma charges. Their weapons are primitive and their armor is weak. The betting pools are giving them one-day survival time at most. Yuna clenched her fists, but Hyunwoo put a hand on her shoulder. Getting angry would not help their mission. Instead, he listened as more aliens joined the conversation. A Zephyrian scout with long, thin limbs and large eyes approached the group. Zephyrians were known across the galaxy as the best snipers because their eyes could see across vast distances and track multiple targets. "The humans will never reach the fortress," the Zephyrian said in his high-pitched voice. "My people have set up detection grids that can spot anything moving within 50 kilometers. These Earth creatures do not know stealth like we do." More aliens gathered around and began placing bets. The odds against the humans kept getting worse. Some aliens bet that none of the 12 would survive the first engagement. Others bet that they would surrender without fighting. A Valoran merchant who looked similar to Thexmar but smaller listened to the betting and shook his forearms. "Humans have fought some small battles against pirates," he said, "but they have never faced organized military forces. The Crimson Void has warriors from races that have been fighting for thousands of years." The crowd of aliens laughed and made more bets. None of them seemed to think humans could pose any real threat. To them, Earth was just another primitive world that had recently learned to travel between stars. Hyunwoo motioned for his team to move away from the crowd. They found a quiet corner of the market where they could talk without being overheard. "Sir, we should show them what humans can do," Yuna said with fire in her eyes. "We will," Hyunwoo replied. "But not here and not now. Let them underestimate us. That will make our job easier." Daejin was checking messages on his device. "The rest of our team is ready, sir. Captain Minsu has finished the reconnaissance planning. Sergeant Tae-young has the equipment loaded. Dr. In-young has medical supplies prepared. Private Woo-jin has been studying the fortress layouts." Hyun-woo nodded. His team was small, but each member was the best at what they did. They had trained together for years and fought in battles that most aliens could not imagine surviving. "What about transport?" he asked. "Specialist Bo-Ra has our ship ready," Daejin answered. "She says the stealth systems are working perfectly, and she has plotted 3 different approach routes to Kepler 442b. The Korean commander looked back toward the group of aliens who were still betting against human survival. They would learn soon enough that Earth had not become a spacefaring civilization by being weak or stupid. Humans had survived ice ages and world wars and hostile environments that would have destroyed most species. "Tell the team we leave in 6 hours," Hyunwoo said. "And Daejin, make sure to record everything. When this mission is over the galaxy, we'll know what human special forces can really do." As they walked back toward their ship, the alien voices faded behind them, but their laughter still echoed through the corridors. Soon that laughter would turn to something very different. The surface of Kepler 442b was a world of red rocks and deep valleys under a pale orange sun. Captain Minsu crouched behind a ridge and watched the Crimson Void fortress through his scope. The massive structure rose from the canyon floor like a metal mountain with weapon towers and shield generators glowing in the dim light. 300 alien mercenaries defended this place, and every one of them expected the humans to attack like other species did. They waited for orbital bombardment, or massed ground assault or siege weapons. Instead, 12 human special forces operators had been moving through the wilderness for 3 days without being detected. Minsu spoke quietly into his throat microphone. "All teams report status. Team Alpha in position," came the voice of Sergeant Tae-young from the eastern approach. "I can see 6 Crethean patrols. They are following the same routes every 4 hours. Team Beta ready," reported Corporal Sung-ho from his sniper position on the northern ridge. "Zephyrian watchers have good visibility, but they are only looking for large formations." Team Gamma set, confirmed Specialist Bo-Ra from the southern valley. "The supply convoy route is clear. I counted 12 guard posts along the main road." Minsu smiled under his camouflaged face mask. The aliens were defending against an army, but the humans had no intention of fighting like an army. Earth's special forces had learned different lessons from different wars. He checked his watch and saw the pale sun beginning to set. Night would bring advantages that the aliens did not expect. Most species in the galaxy had evolved on worlds, with multiple suns or bright moons. True darkness was something they feared. Begin Phase 1, Minsu whispered into his microphone. 15 kilometers away, Corporal Sung-ho adjusted his rifle and settled into a shooting position that he had been preparing for 6 hours. The Korean sniper had crawled through rocky terrain and thick brush to reach a spot where 3 Zephyrian scouts maintained an observation post. Zephyrians were proud of their eyesight and their ability to spot enemies from vast distances. The 3 scouts in the tower believed they could see everything that moved within 50 kilometers. They had been trained by the best military schools on their homeworld and served in wars across the galaxy. None of them noticed the human sniper, who had been lying motionless in the same position since dawn. Sung-ho controlled his breathing and heart rate using techniques that seemed impossible to alien minds. His camouflage was not advanced technology, but simple natural materials that broke up his outline. The first Zephyrian scout fell without a sound. His 2 companions looked around in confusion because they had not heard any weapon fire. Sung-ho's rifle used subsonic ammunition that made almost no noise. The second scout fell 30 seconds later while trying to call for backup. The third managed to reach his communication device but only broadcast static before he collapsed. In less than 2 minutes, the fortress had lost its primary observation post, and the defenders did not even know it. Northern Overwatch eliminated, Sung-ho reported quietly. On the eastern side of the fortress, Sergeant Tae-young was demonstrating a different aspect of human warfare. The Korean soldier had served in mountain conflicts on Earth where fighting was personal and brutal. He understood violence in ways that the galaxy's professional warriors did not. A patrol of 4 Krathian berserkers was moving through a narrow canyon following their regular route. Krathians were born for battle, and their entire culture celebrated combat. They had fought in hundreds of wars and feared very few things in the universe. Tae-young dropped from a cliff face onto the last Krathian in the patrol. His combat knife found the weak spot in the alien's neck armor before the warrior could react. The other 3 Krathians heard something behind them and turned around expecting to fight an enemy they could see. Instead, they found shadows and silence. Tae-young had already moved to a different position using stealth techniques learned from Earth's most dangerous environments. The Krathians roared challenges and searched with their weapons ready, but could not find their target. One by one, they fell to attacks that came from unexpected angles. Tae-young did not fight with honor or ceremony like Krathian culture demanded. He fought to win using every advantage the terrain offered. When the last warrior fell, the canyon was quiet again. Eastern Patrol neutralized. Tae-young's voice came through the team radio. Inside the Fortress Command Center, Thexmar was beginning to realize something was wrong. The 4-armed Valoran had built his reputation by being careful and thorough. He never ignored small problems because small problems could become big disasters. "Commander, we have lost contact with Observation Post 7, reported a nervous Zephyrian communications officer. "Technical failure?" asked Thexmar. "Unknown, sir." They stopped responding during a routine check. Post 12 has also gone silent. Thexmar's 4 hands worked at different control panels while he considered possibilities. Equipment failure was common in frontier territories, but 2 posts losing contact at the same time suggested enemy action. "Send a patrol to investigate both positions," he ordered, "and increase alert status to yellow." What Thexmar did not know was that Private Woo Jin had been inside his fortress for 2 hours. The young Korean soldier had approached the main gate disguised as a maintenance worker from one of the supply companies. His fake identification and work orders were perfect forgeries created by human intelligence services. Woo Jin was smaller than most aliens and could fit through ventilation systems that larger beings could not access. While Thexmar worried about his outer defenses, the human was planting microcharges on key power relays and communication hubs. The explosives were so small that detection scanners ignored them. They used chemical compounds instead of energy signatures that most alien security systems were designed to find. Each charge was precisely calculated to cause maximum disruption with minimum visible damage. "Package delivery complete," Woo Jin whispered into his throat mic. "Ready for Phase 2. Outside the fortress, specialist Bora was preparing to demonstrate human endurance in ways that would shock the alien defenders. The Korean woman had completed a 70-kilometer approach, marched through hostile terrain while carrying full combat equipment. Most alien species could not maintain that pace for more than 20 kilometers before exhaustion set in. Bora had been trained in Earth's harshest environments where humans learned to keep moving long after their bodies wanted to stop. She reached the supply road as a convoy of hover trucks approached the fortress main gate. The vehicles carried food and ammunition for the 300 defenders. Bora had been tracking the convoy's schedule for days and knew exactly when it would pass her position. The lead truck exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the canyon walls. The other vehicles stopped and armed guards jumped out looking for attackers they could not see. Bora had already moved to a different position where she could target the second truck. More explosions followed as the convoy burned. Guards ran in all directions, firing their weapons at shadows while Bora picked them off from concealment. The aliens had expected an attack by large forces with heavy weapons. One human with portable explosives was not something they had prepared for. Supply line disrupted, Bora reported. Multiple enemy casualties. Back in the command center, alarms were sounding, and Thexmar was trying to understand what was happening to his forces. Reports came in of attacks from multiple directions, but no one could identify the enemy or estimate their numbers. "Sir, the supply convoy is destroyed," shouted a Gorvani officer. "Heavy weapons fire from unknown positions. Sir, we have lost contact, with 3 more observation posts," added the communications officer. "Something is systematically eliminating our outer defenses." Thexmar had fought battles across the galaxy, but this felt different from anything he had experienced. His enemy was invisible and seemed to strike from everywhere at once. Standard military doctrine said to consolidate forces and establish defensive positions, but the attacks were too scattered and too precise. "All units fall back to the fortress perimeter," he ordered. "Activate all detection grids and prepare for siege defense." What the Velaran commander did not realize was that the humans had no intention of conducting a siege. While his forces pulled back to defensive positions, Dr. In Young was analyzing the fortress layout and identifying weak points that aliens would never consider. The Korean medic had studied alien psychology and biology for years. She understood how different species thought and what they feared. Her job was not just to treat wounded humans, but to predict enemy behavior and exploit weaknesses. "Commander, I have structural analysis complete." In Young's voice came through the team radio. "Recommend immediate assault while they are repositioning forces." Minsu looked at the fortress through his scope and saw alien warriors moving into prepared positions. They expected a conventional attack that would come at dawn with maximum visibility. Instead, they were about to learn why human special forces preferred to fight in darkness. "All teams begin final approach," Minsu ordered. "Remember, we are not trying to conquer this place. We just need to get inside and retrieve the cores." As the alien defenders settled into their positions and waited for morning, the 12 humans began moving toward the fortress walls. Master Sergeant Haijin moved through the fortress corridors like a ghost that could think and plan. The Korean intelligence specialist had studied every species in the Crimson Void for months before this mission. She knew their fears and their hatred and their ancient grudges against each other. The fortress was designed by Velarans who trusted in thick walls and heavy weapons. But the builders had not considered that their defenders came from 6 different worlds, with 6 different ways of thinking about war and honor and survival. Hyojin planted small speakers in ventilation shafts and maintenance areas throughout the fortress. The devices would broadcast sounds that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Not human voices or obvious tricks, but subtle noises that would make different species think their ancient enemies were nearby. A scratching sound that reminded Krathians of their ancestral predators. A high-pitched hum that triggered fear responses in Zephyrian nervous systems. Low-frequency vibrations that made Gorvani think of territorial challenges from rival tribes. Within an hour, the fortress defenders were reporting strange sounds and unexplained phenomena. Guards began shooting at shadows and demanding to know why other species were in their patrol areas. Trust between the different alien races started to crack under pressure they could not understand. Psychological operations in progress. Hye Jin whispered into her throat microphone. Enemy cohesion decreasing. 3 levels below Master Sergeant Hye Jin, Private Wu Jin was demonstrating why human special forces never fought fair when lives were at stake. The young Korean soldier had learned combat techniques from Earth's most dangerous conflicts where survival mattered more than honor or tradition. A squad of 5 Gorvani heavy assault troops was moving through the main armory looking for human infiltrators. Each Gorvani stood over 2 meters tall and weighed more than 3 humans combined. Their thick gray skin could stop small arms fire, and their massive arms could crush metal with bare hands. The squad leader was a veteran warrior named Grex, who had fought in 40 battles across the galaxy. He had killed enemies from dozens of species, and feared nothing that walked on 2 legs. Grex had heard stories about human warriors but dismissed them as propaganda from a primitive world. Wu Jin waited in the shadows above the armory entrance and watched the 5 giants search through weapon racks and supply crates. The aliens moved with confidence because they believed their size and strength made them invincible against smaller opponents. The first Gorvani died when a human combat knife found the nerve cluster behind his thick neck. Wu Jin had studied alien anatomy for years and knew exactly where each species was vulnerable. The massive warrior dropped without a sound, while his companions continued searching. Grex found his soldier's body 30 seconds later and roared a challenge that echoed through the entire fortress. The other 3 Gorvani raised their plasma rifles and began firing at anything that moved. They expected their enemy to face them in honorable combat like civilized warriors were supposed to do. Instead, Wu Jin used the fortress systems against them. He triggered fire suppression equipment that filled the armory with thick foam. Emergency lighting flickered on and off, creating a maze of moving shadows. Ventilation fans roared to life, drowning out the sounds of movement. One by one, the remaining Gorvani fell to attacks they never saw coming. Wu Jin struck from above and below and through walls they thought were solid. He used their own weapons against them and turned their strength into weakness by making them fight in conditions where size did not matter. When the foam cleared and the lights stopped flashing, Grex lay dead with his squad around him. They had been killed by an enemy half their size using nothing but standard human equipment and superior tactical thinking. Armory secured, Wu Jin reported quietly. Heavy resistance eliminated, 2 kilometers away from the fortress corporal. Sung Ho was teaching the galaxy's finest snipers about patience and precision. The Korean marksman had been lying in the same position for 18 hours without moving more than a few centimeters. Most alien snipers used advanced technology to find and track their targets. Energy detection systems and computer-guided weapons that did most of the work for them. They were skilled, but they depended on equipment more than personal ability. Sung Ho used tools that would have seemed primitive to his alien counterparts. A simple optical scope and manual calculations for wind speed and distance. But he had something the aliens lacked, which was the ability to remain perfectly still for as long as necessary. A team of 4 Zephyrian scout snipers had set up a counter-sniper, positioned on a ridge overlooking the fortress approach. They were considered the best marksmen in the Crimson Void, and had never missed a target they could see. The Zephyrians swept the landscape with thermal sensors and motion detectors looking for the human who had eliminated their observation posts. Their equipment was state-of-the-art and could detect a heartbeat from 2 kilometers away. None of their technology found Sung Ho because he was controlling his body functions using techniques that seemed impossible to alien minds. His heart rate was so slow that sensors read him as dead. His body temperature matched the rocks around him. He had become part of the landscape. The first Zephyrian sniper fell when he thought he saw movement in a different direction. Sung Ho's bullet traveled over 3 kilometers and arrived before the sound of the shot. The other 3 snipers spun around trying to locate the source of fire. Their sensors showed nothing but empty terrain. Their computers calculated impossible firing angles. By the time they realized they were being hunted by something beyond their understanding, 2 more of their team were dead. The last Zephyrian abandoned his position and tried to retreat toward the fortress. Sung Ho tracked him through the scope and squeezed the trigger one final time. The alien fell just outside the fortress walls where his body would be found by the defenders. Perimeter threats eliminated. Sung Ho's voice came through the team. Radio. All approaches secure. Inside the Fortress Command Center, Thexamar was losing control of his forces and his reputation. The four-armed Valoran had built the Crimson Void into the most feared mercenary organization in the sector. But now, his carefully trained warriors were falling apart. Reports flooded in from every level of the fortress. Units were going silent without explanation. Defensive positions were being abandoned as troops retreated from enemies they could not see. The different alien species were starting to blame each other for the disasters. Commander, the Krathians are demanding to know why Gorvani forces abandoned the armory, shouted his communications officer. Commander, the Zephyrians report that someone is using their own equipment against them, added another aide. Commander, we have lost contact with all external observation posts, a third voice called out. Thexamar slammed his four fists on the control panel and tried to think clearly. He had fought against every major military force in the galaxy, but this was different. His enemy was not following any known tactical doctrine or strategic pattern. How many attackers do we face? He demanded. Unknown. Sir, reports vary from a full division to a single infiltrator. No one has seen the enemy clearly enough to give accurate numbers. The Valoran commander realized he was fighting ghosts that could kill his warriors and vanish without trace. Standard military response was useless against an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. Seal all entrances, he ordered. Go to full defensive lockdown. If we cannot find them, we will make them come to us. What Thexamar did not know was that Dr. In-Young had been studying his psychology and his command decisions for the past 4 hours. The Korean intelligence analyst was intercepting Fortress, communications and building a profile of the enemy leader. In-Young understood that Valorans were proud warriors who valued reputation above survival. Thexamar would never surrender or retreat because losing face was worse than death in his culture. This knowledge gave the humans a significant advantage in predicting his responses. Commander, enemy leadership assessment complete, In-Young reported, over the radio. Target will consolidate forces in the central stronghold. Recommend immediate penetration while defenses are confused. Captain Min-Soo received the intelligence update and smiled grimly. The fortress defenders were doing exactly what human psychological warfare was designed to make them do. They were retreating into a smaller space where their numbers would work against them. All teams converge on primary objective, Min-Soo ordered. The quantum cores are 3 levels down in the central vault. Time to finish this job. Sergeant Yuna was already inside the fortress main structure with enough explosives to level a city block. The Korean demolitions expert had spent the day placing shaped charges at key structural points throughout the building. The aliens had built their fortress to withstand orbital bombardment and siege weapons. They never considered that a small amount of explosives placed in exactly the right locations could bring down the entire structure from the inside. Demolition charges ready, Yuna reported. I can bring this place down in 30 seconds once we have the cores. Throughout the fortress, alien warriors huddled in defensive positions and waited for an attack that was already happening all around them. They had lost more than 60 soldiers to an enemy they had never clearly seen. Major Wanbin stood in the communications center of Earth's military headquarters on Luna Station and watched data streams from across the galaxy. The Korean officer commanded the 3rd Special Operations Battalion and had been monitoring the Kepler 442b mission through encrypted channels. What he saw on the tactical displays would change human military doctrine forever. 12 Special Forces operators had not just completed an impossible mission, but had done it in a way that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Sir, we are receiving priority messages from 17 different star systems, reported Lieutenant Colonel So Young as she approached with multiple data pads. Mercenary networks are broadcasting warnings about human military capabilities. Wanbin took the first pad and read the message that had originated from a Rigel trading station. The text was in simplified Galactic Common, but the meaning was clear. A mercenary company had refused a contract because it might involve contact with human forces. The second message came from Vega System, where an alien warlord was offering triple pay for anyone willing to fight humans. No mercenary groups had accepted the contract. The third message was from Proxima Centauri, where a pirate syndicate had officially declared human space off-limits to their operations. How long ago did Captain Min-Soo's team extract the cores? Wanbin asked. 47 hours, sir. They completed the mission and returned to base without casualties. But the fortress defenders survived and they are talking. Wanbin understood what was happening. News traveled fast through the galaxy's underworld networks. Within days, every criminal organization and mercenary company would know that 12 humans had destroyed the Crimson Void Syndicate's reputation. On the corporate world of New Geneva, CEO Park Soo-jin was dealing with the aftermath of that reputation in ways she had never expected. Park ran human defense contractors which provided security services to corporations and governments across human space. Her company had been small and relatively unknown outside Earth's sphere of influence. Most alien businesses preferred to hire established mercenary companies with long histories and proven records. Humans were considered too new and inexperienced for serious military work. That had changed overnight when news of the Kepler mission reached the corporate networks. Park's communication systems were overwhelmed with contract offers from alien governments and business cartels. Everyone wanted to hire human special forces, but nobody wanted to admit it publicly. "Ma'am, we have another coded transmission from the Andromedan Trade Consortium," reported her assistant Jin-A, as she brought yet another encrypted message. "They want to discuss a long-term security arrangement for their frontier mining operations." Park read the message and shook her head in amazement. 6 months ago, the Andromedans had refused to even meet with human representatives. Now they were offering exclusive contracts worth more than her company's entire previous revenue. "What about the Vorthan Empire inquiry?" Park asked. "Still waiting for our response, ma'am. They want to know if we can provide training services for their special forces units. They are offering to pay in rare metals and advanced technology licenses. The Vortans were one of the oldest military powers in the galaxy. Their armies had conquered hundreds of worlds over thousands of years. The fact that they wanted to learn from humans was almost impossible to believe." Park walked to her office window and looked out at the busy spaceport below. Ships from dozens of worlds were landing and taking off in the pale light of New Geneva's twin suns. Some of those ships carried representatives who had come specifically to meet with human military contractors. Jin-A schedule meetings with all the major inquiries, she decided, but make sure they understand our terms. We do not work for anyone who might use our services against Earth or human colonies. 3,000 light-years away on the fortress world of Kepler 442b, the survivors of the Crimson Void were learning what it meant to be associated with failure. Thexmar sat in temporary shelter outside the ruins of his headquarters and tried to understand what had destroyed his organization. The fortress still stood, but it was empty and powerless. The humans had taken the quantum cores and left without, destroying the building or killing unnecessary defenders. That restraint somehow made their victory more humiliating than total destruction would have been. "Commander, we have lost our certification with the Mercenary Guild," reported his aide Krelax with obvious shame. "Our contract bonds have been cancelled and our reputation rating has been suspended." Thexmar's forearms clenched into fists. The Mercenary Guild controlled most military contracting in the galaxy. Without their certification, the Crimson Void could not bid on profitable jobs or recruit quality warriors. "What reason did they give?" he asked. "Failure to maintain security, standards and loss of classified materials to hostile forces," Krelax replied. They also cited reports of poor tactical planning and inadequate force deployment. The Valoran commander wanted to rage against the unfairness of the judgment. His forces had been outnumbered 1 to 25 and had faced enemies using tactics no civilized species would consider honorable. But the galaxy did not care about excuses or explanations. "Sir, there is more," Krelax continued reluctantly. 3 of our major clients have terminated their contracts. The Helix Corporation says they cannot risk association with a company that lost to 12 primitives from Earth. Thexmar stood up and walked away from his aide before he said something that would make the situation worse. The Helix Corporation had been the Crimson Void's biggest client for over a decade. Losing them would force the organization to disband or accept much smaller and less profitable jobs. On the other side of the galaxy, General Yi Su was representing Earth at an emergency session of the Galactic Military Council. The Korean general had been expecting routine discussions about border security and trade route protection. Instead, she found herself at the center of a debate about human military capabilities. "General Yi Su, we need clarification about your Species military doctrine demanded Admiral Zethkar of the Hegemony Fleet. The massive Titan officer stood 3 meters tall and commanded respect through size and reputation. What specific information do you require, Admiral? Yisu replied calmly. Your forces completed the Kepler mission using tactics that our analysts cannot understand or classify. We need to know if this represents standard human military training, or if these were specially modified soldiers. Yisu had been briefed on the mission details, but even she was impressed by what Captain Minsu's team had accomplished. 12. Operators against 300 defenders was odds that no military academy would consider reasonable. The team used standard special forces training and equipment, she answered truthfully. Human military doctrine emphasizes adaptability and individual initiative over rigid tactical formations. The council chamber erupted in discussions as representatives from dozens of species tried to process this information. Standard training had produced results that exceeded their best special forces units. Either humans were lying about their capabilities, or Earth had developed military techniques far beyond galactic norms. General, we would like to request joint training exercises between human forces and Galactic Defense Command units, announced Fleet Commander Vesitara of the Confederacy Navy. Our military colleges are interested in studying human tactical approaches. Yisu nodded diplomatically, but she was thinking about the implications of that request. 6 months ago, these same officers had dismissed human military power as insignificant. Now they wanted to learn from Earth's warriors. Back on Luna Station, Major Wanbin was reading intelligence reports that confirmed what he had suspected. The Kepler mission had not just completed its objectives, but had fundamentally changed how the galaxy viewed human military capabilities. Mercenary companies across known space were adding new clauses to their contracts. The standard language now included provisions for refusing jobs that might involve combat with human forces. Insurance companies were charging higher premiums for operations in systems where Earth had military presence. Sir, we have a priority message from Frontier Command, Lieutenant Colonel So Young announced as she brought another datapad. They want to know if we can provide advisors for the new Colonial Defense Force training program. Wanbin read the message and realized that Earth's military was about to become much larger and much more important than anyone had planned. Colonial worlds that had never requested military support were now asking for human protection services. So Young, prepare a briefing for command staff, he ordered. We need to expand recruiting and training programs immediately. The galaxy wants to hire human soldiers, and we need to be ready to meet that demand. On a trading station in the Vega system, a group of alien pirates was having a very different conversation about humans and their military abilities. The pirates had built successful careers by avoiding military forces and targeting weak civilian ships. The word is out, announced Captain Veltar to his crew of mixed-species criminals. No jobs in human space and no contracts against Earth colonies. The risk is too high for the potential profit. A young Crethean warrior named Grixenol laughed at his captain's caution. You fear a species that has been in space for less than a century. How dangerous can these humans really be? Admiral Jae Sung stood at the podium in the Galactic Defense Council's main assembly hall and looked out at representatives from over 200 species. The Korean officer wore the dress uniform of Earth's stellar navy with decorations that most aliens could not identify but somehow looked impressive. 1 year had passed since the Kepler mission and everything had changed. The galaxy that once dismissed humans as primitive newcomers now treated Earth as a major military power. The transformation had happened faster than anyone thought possible. Honored representatives, Admiral Jae Sung began in clear galactic common. I stand before you today to present humanity's application for membership in the Special Operations Command. A murmur ran through the massive chamber as translators converted his words into dozens of different languages. The Special Operations Command was the most exclusive military organization in the galaxy. Only species with proven special forces capabilities were invited to join. Our application includes operational reports from 17 successful missions conducted over the past year, the Admiral continued. Human special forces have completed objectives that other military units deemed impossible. The holographic displays around the chamber showed data from those missions. Hostage rescues on worlds where no other species could survive. intelligence gathering in locations protected by the galaxy's best security systems, counterterrorism operations against enemies that had defeated conventional military forces. Fleet Admiral Corvash of the Titan hegemony raised one massive hand to request permission to speak. The 3-meter-tall alien commanded respect through size and military reputation built over centuries of warfare. Admiral Jae-sung, we have studied your force's methods extensively, Corvash rumbled in his deep voice. Your warriors use techniques that violate several articles of the Galactic Combat Conventions. How do you justify these practices? Jae-sung had expected this question and had prepared his answer carefully. The combat conventions were designed by species that fought wars according to ancient codes of honor and traditional tactical doctrine. Humans had learned warfare under very different circumstances. Fleet Admiral, the combat conventions assume that all species share similar concepts of honorable warfare, he replied. Humans developed military doctrine on a world where survival required adaptation rather than tradition. Our methods may seem unconventional, but they are effective. Colonel So Young stepped forward and activated a training hologram that showed human special forces instructors working with alien students. The demonstration had been recorded at the new joint training facility on Titan Station. Observe how human techniques can enhance existing capabilities rather than replace traditional methods. So Young explained as the hologram showed a Krathian warrior learning stealth techniques that his species had never considered necessary. The alien student was struggling with concepts that seemed simple to human instructors. Remaining motionless for extended periods was almost impossible for a species bred for constant aggressive action. The Krathian kept fidgeting and making noise that would alert any enemy within kilometers. Your body wants to fight, the human instructor explained patiently. But sometimes the best fight is the one your enemy never knows is happening until it is too late. After hours of practice, the Krathian finally managed to remain still and silent for 30 minutes. His excitement at mastering the technique was obvious even through the holographic recording. This warrior returned to his unit and taught these skills to his squad, So Young reported to the council. Their effectiveness in reconnaissance missions improved by over 400%. Similar demonstrations showed Zephyrian snipers learning to shoot without electronic assistance, and Gorvani heavy troops discovering that intelligence could be more valuable than strength in certain situations. General Vextara of the Andromedan Defense Force stood to ask the next question. Her species were known for analytical thinking and careful planning rather than battlefield aggression. Colonel So Young, we understand that human training methods are effective, she said in her precise manner of speaking. But what concerns us is the psychological impact on our forces. Several alien warriors have reported that human combat doctrine is disturbing to conventional military thinking. So Young nodded because she had heard similar reports from other joint training programs. Species that had fought according to established rules for thousands of years found human flexibility difficult to accept. General humans do not see warfare as a game with fixed rules, she replied. We see it as a problem that must be solved using any available resources. This difference in perspective can be challenging for species with more traditional military cultures. The discussion continued for several hours as council members asked detailed questions about human military doctrine and training methods. Some representatives seemed impressed by human capabilities, while others remained concerned about the implications. Finally, Council Chairman Nexusaval called for the formal vote on humanity's application. The ancient ethereal was old enough to remember when several current member species had first applied for Special Operations Command membership. The question before this council is whether humanity possesses the capabilities and commitment necessary for membership in our organization. Chairman Nexusaval announced, all those in favor of accepting Earth's application, please indicate your position. Admiral Jae-sung watched as voting displays lit up around the chamber. Green lights indicated support, while red lights showed opposition. The pattern that emerged was not what he had expected. Species that had initially dismissed human military power now voted in favor of the application. The Titan hegemony and Andromedan Defense Force both supported Earth's membership. Even the proud Valoran Empire voted to accept humans despite their cultural emphasis on traditional combat honor. The final tally showed overwhelming support for humanity's application. Only 12 species voted against membership, and most of those were small powers with limited military experience. By vote of this council, humanity is hereby accepted as the newest member of the Galactic Defense Council. Special Operations Command Chairman Nexus Vel announced, Admiral Jae Sung, please accept our congratulations and our expectations for continued excellence. 3 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Dong Hyun was establishing Earth's first joint special forces unit with alien partners. The Korean officer had been selected to command a mixed team of human and alien operators for missions that required diverse capabilities. His team included 2 Krethian close combat specialists who had learned human stealth techniques, a Zephyrian sniper who combined her species' natural vision with human patience and camouflage methods, a Gorvani heavy weapons expert who had discovered that thinking tactically made his strength even more effective. Today we begin training for our first joint operation, Dong Hyun announced to his assembled team. The mission will require skills from all our species and cultures working together toward a common objective. The human and alien operators stood together in the training facility and listened as their commander explained the mission parameters. They were no longer separate military forces competing for contracts and reputation. They were partners learning from each other. Private Wu Jin had been promoted to sergeant and assigned as the team's infiltration specialist. His experience at the Kepler Fortress had made him famous throughout human special forces and respected by alien military leaders. Sergeant Wu Jin will demonstrate human stealth techniques adapted for non-human physiology, Dong Hyun continued. Remember that each species brings unique advantages to our team. Success depends on combining those advantages effectively. The training session that followed would have seemed impossible just 2 years earlier. Human soldiers teaching ancient warrior races new ways to fight while learning alien techniques that enhanced their own capabilities. On the other side of the galaxy, the former commander of the Crimson Void was working as a security consultant for merchant convoys. Thexamar had lost his mercenary organization and his reputation, but he had gained something more valuable, which was knowledge about human warfare. Captain, the convoy route passes through 3 systems where human military forces maintain patrol bases, he reported to the merchant captain who had hired his services. I recommend we file full travel plans and request escort authorization rather than risk any misunderstandings. The merchant was a Rigel trader who had built his fortune by cutting corners and avoiding regulations. He looked annoyed by Thexmar's suggestion, because proper documentation would cost time and money. Former commander, you were once the most feared warrior in this sector, the trader complained. Now you counsel caution against a species that has been spacefaring for less than 2 centuries. Thexmar's 4 arms gestured toward the star charts displayed on the bridge screens. Red markers indicated systems where human forces had conducted successful operations against pirates and smugglers in the past year. Captain, I have fought against humans and I understand what they are capable of doing, he replied with complete seriousness. They do not follow the same rules as other species. They adapt and improvise and never give up. Avoiding conflict with them is the wisest course for anyone who values profit over glory.